Then it happened. Knock. Sharp, solid, and unexpected. She froze, the wine hovering just below her lips. Another knock. Louder. More certain. Her brows pulled together. Who would show up unannounced on a Wednesday at 9:47 p.m., especially in this weather? She stood and set the glass down on the piano top. It landed with a quiet clink, the sound oddly final. Her bare feet moved silently across the travertine floor as the storm outside roared louder. The door was tall, heavy. She didn't need the peephole. Welcome to Love and Twilight, the place where gentle reflections, heartfelt emotions, and meaningful stories come alive. Here, we believe love is more than just a feeling. It's a journey, a lesson, and a light that carries us through life's darkest hours. If you're someone who values compassion, healing, and true connection, you've found the right space. So, take a deep breath, relax, and let's walk this path together. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts. In the comments, we'd love to hear your voice and grow together with you. She already knew. Her hand touched the brass handle, trembling slightly. Still, she pulled it open without hesitation. There he stood. Alistair. Her ex-husband, the man who had once pressed promises into her skin, the father of her daughters, the same man who had walked out 15 years ago without a second glance. Now, he was soaked, his hair plastered to his head, his expensive suit was waterlogged, and his hands, once commanding, shook like he'd been standing there for more than just a minute. His eyes weren't the same. The arrogance, the superiority, they were gone. What stood in front of her wasn't the powerful man she once loved. It was the wreckage of him. Jacqueline. He croaked. I had nowhere else to go. Her heart clenched, but her face didn't show it. She noticed everything, the way his jaw quivered from more than just cold, how his shoes squelched. On her porch, how he looked like a man who'd finally run out of power and excuses. She almost shut the door. But then, for the first time since he left, she saw something buried deep in his eyes. Something that wasn't ego, wasn't desperation. It was humility. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Instead, she opened the door wider and stepped aside. Come in, she said quietly. You're ruining my floors. Alistair stepped inside slowly, dripping onto the polished marble like a ghost that didn't know where it belonged. His eyes roamed the space, the home that still carried her essence. Soft velvet curtains, a grand piano he used to hear her play, and the massive portrait of their twin daughters at age 10 still hanging in the hallway. She walked away without a word, disappearing into the hallway, returning seconds later with a towel. She tossed it at him. He fumbled with it, catching it with awkward hands. Thank you, he muttered. She folded her arms, watching him. Her face unreadable. Her beauty had changed, sharpened, refined. She had become sovereign. You. Look, she began, searching for a word that wouldn't invite conversation, drenched. A ghost of a chuckle escaped his lips, but he didn't push it further. Jacqueline, I lost everything. She arched an eyebrow, unimpressed. I'm not sure why you think I care. The hedge fund collapsed. The penthouse in Dubai? Gone. The cars, the company, and her, that single word. It sliced the room in half. Selena's gone, he said. Took the last of what I had. I'm bankrupt. I'm broken. I have nothing left except stage 3 colon cancer? He blinked. How? Because that's the only thing strong enough to drag a man like you back to his knees. Or my doorstep. He looked away. Shame flared across his cheeks. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I didn't know where else to go. I thought maybe. She raised a hand. Don't finish that sentence. You don't get to speak their names. Not yet. Alistair nodded slowly, towel pressed to his face. Jacqueline's eyes traced him up and down, not with lust, not with nostalgia. With calculation. This man, this was once the king of empires. He had held boardrooms hostage with his confidence. He had made nations bend with a phone call. Now, he was a shadow in her foyer. Her lips parted. Guest room. One night, she said sharply. Then you leave. Again. He didn't argue. He didn't nod. He simply moved toward the hall, dripping, silent, stunned by her mercy. But that night, Jacqueline didn't sleep. The storm outside mirrored something deep inside her chest. She wandered her home in silence, through the study, the corridor of glass, past the door of the guest room she now hated for existing. She stopped at the portrait of their daughters, Serenity and Trinity, age 25 now, unstoppable, goddesses with ambition and teeth, raised without a man's influence, raised by a woman who swore she would never be a victim. Still, her fingers lingered on the frame. She hated the storm for what it stirred in her, because the truth was, beneath the steel, beneath the lessons, beneath the years, something still burned. Desire, not for what they had, but for what he took from her. And now, he was back, a man reduced, and yet, he still knew how to fill a doorway. The guest room door clicked shut. Jacqueline remained in the hallway, arms crossed, spine straight. She could still hear the soft patter of water dripping from his clothes onto the Persian rug. She hated that she knew the sound. She turned and walked back to the kitchen. Her wine was still there, now room temperature. She tossed it down in one gulp. 15 years, 15 birthdays, 15 Christmases, 15 moments when their daughters reached for a father who wasn't there. And now he comes back in a rainstorm like he's starring in a second chance movie? She scoffed aloud. Then she laughed. But it wasn't funny. 15 years ago. She remembered the morning. He wore a navy suit, red tie. She'd ironed it for him. He kissed her cheek like nothing was wrong. Told her he had a board meeting. It wasn't a boardroom he ended up in. It was Selena's downtown loft. She found out from a blog. A lifestyle influencer had snapped a photo of the two of them at a rooftop bar. Alistair, laughing, arm around a woman who looked like a knockoff version of herself, only 20 years younger. Jacqueline hadn't cried. Not until Serenity asked, "Why isn't Daddy coming back?" Not until Trinity stopped speaking at school. She didn't scream, didn't throw dishes. She packed his things, sent them to his new address, and moved on. Not moved past, just forward, back in the present. Jacqueline slipped off her robe and pulled on a long sweater. She padded barefoot through the hallway, passing by the guest room again. She paused for half a second. Silence. Then she climbed the stairs. Her bedroom was dimly lit, curtains drawn against the storm. She lay across the bed, not in it, on top of the covers, arms folded beneath her head. Sleep wouldn't come. Instead, memories barged in like unwelcome guests. Alistair pressing his lips to her neck in Rome, whispering French promises. Alistair coaching the girls on how to ride bikes in the courtyard. Alistair's signature on the divorce papers, delivered by a junior associate. That night she'd stood in this very bedroom, staring at her own reflection and whispering, "You'll rise." And she did. She built her architecture firm into a multinational brand, raised twin daughters into two of the most powerful women in their fields, became the woman other women read about in Forbes and whispered about at fundraisers. She became more than he ever imagined she could. Yet tonight, she couldn't silence the fire in her chest, and that fire had a name. Downstairs, the hallway light flicked on. Jacqueline heard movement, bare feet, the soft thud of a cabinet closing. She followed the sounds. Quietly, she found him in the guest kitchen, shirtless, back turned to her. He was making coffee. Old habits, she thought bitterly. He never could sleep without coffee at night. "Didn't peg you for a midnight barista," she said. He jumped, almost dropping the mug. She leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, her hair tousled from restlessness, her legs bare beneath the sweater, her gaze unreadable. He set the mug down and faced her. His torso was leaner than she remembered. Not gym fit, just worn. Time had carved itself into him. "Couldn't sleep," he said. She didn't respond. "I'm used to making it for two," he added. She raised a brow. "You talking about me? Or her?" Alistair swallowed. "Jacqueline, answer the question." He looked her in the eye. "I thought about you every single time." Her chest tightened. She stepped into the room. "When you kissed her neck, did you picture mine?" "Yes." "When you held her in bed, did you pretend it was my back against your chest?" "I did." "When you whispered love into her ears, did you ever say my name by mistake?" He didn't answer. His jaw flexed. She stepped closer. The air changed. "When you came," she whispered, "whose name was it?" Alistair's voice cracked. "Yours." Silence. Then, without warning, she slapped him. The sound echoed. He didn't react, just closed his eyes and let the shame settle. Then he opened them again. I deserved that. No, you deserve 100 of those, but I only had one in me. She turned to leave, but didn't. She turned back. What do you want, Alistair? His throat worked. To apologize. To whom? You. Them. Everyone I failed. Then start with this. Why did you leave? He stared at her like he'd been waiting for this question. I was stupid. Vain. I believed the lie that youth meant vitality, that you would always be here if I changed my mind. She stepped closer. Do you want me now? She asked, voice low. Yes. Her palm gripped his jaw. Firm. You don't get to want me like a man wants comfort food. You want me like I'm a woman with fire in her blood. Say it. I want you like I'll burn for you, he breathed. Jacqueline paused, stared deep into his eyes, then turned and walked out of the room. She didn't say another word. Back upstairs, she closed her bedroom door and locked it. The storm hadn't let up. Thunder rumbled overhead like the sky was having a tantrum. She climbed into bed and pulled the covers over her chest. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from hunger, not for his touch, for the justice of being wanted, properly. If he thought he was going to crawl back into her life and into her heart with just a towel and a sad face, he was mistaken. But what haunted her more was this: she had tasted power, real power. She had raised 2 daughters alone. She had led a global firm. She had conquered rooms full of egos with just her presence. And still, this man could stir something in her that made her body betray her pride. She hated that. She loved that. She closed her eyes. And when she dreamed of revenge wrapped in silk. The next morning arrived quietly, as if the storm had taken its rage and left in the night. Sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Jacqueline's estate, brushing, gold across the marble and catching on the floating dust in the air. It was peaceful, too peaceful. Jacqueline was already awake, dressed in cream lounge pants and a high-collared top, hair pulled into a loose bun. She moved, with the precision of someone who had learned long ago never to let chaos dictate her grace. She was halfway through her espresso when she heard movement again. Barefoot steps in the hallway. A pause. Then the soft knock. She didn't answer. The door creaked open anyway. Alistair stepped into the kitchen, slower this time, like he didn't want to startle anything, not even the silence. He wore one of the guest robes. It clung awkwardly to his frame. His eyes were red, not from sleep, but from the kind of crying a man does when no one's watching and shame won't leave him alone. You're up early, he said quietly. Jacqueline didn't look up from her espresso. I don't waste daylight. He nodded. Do you mind if I... He gestured toward the cabinet. She tilted her head slightly, which was as close to go ahead as he was going to get. He moved with reverence, like the house itself might reject him. Every movement was cautious, measured, nothing like the commanding man who once walked these halls like a king. She watched him fumble with the coffee pods. You forget how to use it? She asked. He smiled sheepishly. It's been a while since I made anything without a chef. Jacqueline smirked. Wealth made you helpless. Worse. Arrogant. She said nothing. I didn't expect you to let me in, he added. I almost didn't. So, why did you... She took another sip, then looked at him. Really looked. You didn't come back wearing pride. You came back wearing guilt. Most men bring excuses. You brought nothing. That's why. Alistair nodded. I'm not here to beg for pity. No, you're here to bleed. And I'm not going to stop you. He leaned against the counter. You always did have a way with knives. Her eyes narrowed. Don't flirt with me, Alistair. That ship burned. He sighed. I wasn't trying to. I'm just remembering how sharp you were, still are. Silence again. Then, you know what the worst part was? Jacqueline said, voice low. It wasn't the affair. It wasn't the scandal. It was looking my daughters in the eye, year after year, and watching them wonder why they weren't enough to keep their father around. Alistair lowered his gaze. They were enough. You were enough. I wasn't. She set her espresso cup down and stood. Do you want to see them? His head shot up. What? I said, do you want to see your daughters? His lips parted, then closed again. I do. Good. Because I already called them. You what? I called them this morning. Told them you were here. Alistair looked stunned. They'll be here in an hour, she said. I told them they didn't owe you anything, that they didn't have to come, but they said yes. He swallowed hard. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank them. And don't expect hugs. Don't expect tears. They're not little girls anymore. I understand. Jacqueline leaned closer. If you try to manipulate them, I will end you with a smile. His shoulders dropped. I deserve that. She looked at him for a long time. You look like a man who finally got humbled. I am. Shame it took cancer to make it happen. Alistair didn't defend himself. He simply nodded. And that, more than anything, made her pause. There was a man beneath the wreckage. And maybe, just maybe, that man was trying to crawl out. 1 hour later, Jacqueline stood by the grand front door, arms folded. Alistair waited near the living room archway. He was dressed better now, one of the spare button-downs from the guest closet, slacks that fit, and hair combed back, but he still looked like a man preparing to meet a firing squad. Then the doorbell rang. Jacqueline opened the door. 2 women walked in. Tall, powerful, dressed with elegance and intention. Their heels clicked across the marble floor like drumbeats of judgment. Serenity, Trinity, identical on the outside. One wore a fitted burgundy power suit. The other, a minimalist ivory dress with a smartwatch clipped at the wrist. Both were stunning, fierce, poised. Alistair took 1 step forward. Neither daughter smiled. You look old, Serenity said. Trinity added, and pathetic. Jacqueline bit the inside of her cheek, hiding a smirk. Alistair nodded. I am. The tension was thick. Jacqueline broke it. I'll leave you 3 to talk. No, Trinity said. Stay. Please, Serenity added. This isn't a father-daughter reunion. This is a courtroom. Jacqueline stepped to the side and leaned against the wall. Alistair stood still, hands folded in front of him. I have no excuses, he said. Only apologies. I left. I was selfish. I destroyed something beautiful. Serenity's voice cracked like a whip. You abandoned us. I know. You missed graduations, Trinity said. You missed heartbreaks, surgeries, milestones. I won my first science award and cried in a bathroom because I had no one to call. Serenity stepped closer, and I stopped believing men stay. Because you didn't. Alistair's hands trembled. I'm sorry, he whispered. Silence. Trinity crossed her arms. We're not here to forgive. We're here to listen. Serenity nodded. And maybe, consider if you're worth hearing again someday. That alone hit harder than any slap. They spoke for 20 minutes. Alistair didn't interrupt, didn't argue. He just listened and cried. By the end of it, Trinity handed him a napkin. Not out of affection, out of dignity. Then they both turned to Jacqueline. We're going to brunch, Serenity said. Want to come? Jacqueline nodded. I'll grab my bag. As she passed Alistair, he whispered, Thank you. She paused, then looked him straight in the eyes. You showed humility today. Keep showing it. Then she walked out with her daughters, heels echoing like victory. The house felt heavier after the twins left. Not with tension, but with truth. Alistair stood alone in the foyer, the echo of their voices still haunting the space. He hadn't moved since the door shut. Jacqueline returned to the kitchen without saying a word. Her silence wasn't cruel. It was controlled, measured, like she'd said everything she needed to say for now. Upstairs, the guest room door remained open, untouched since the morning. The robe he wore still held the scent of lavender from the linen closet, a detail that stung more than comforted. Once upon a time, she used to spray his pillow with that scent before he traveled. Now she gave it to strangers. Alistair walked to the guest room and closed the door behind him. He sat on the edge of the bed, his palms pressed into his knees, elbows digging into his thighs. His body sagged, not from exhaustion, but from the emotional weight of facing the consequences he'd dodged for 15 years. Their words hadn't just pierced, they cracked open the parts of him he had buried in denial. He didn't ask for a second chance. He didn't deserve one. But still, he was here. Downstairs, Jacqueline stood by the open window. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply breathed in the early afternoon air, letting the sunlight dry the moisture that lingered in her chest. Her daughters were magnificent, composed, ruthless in their grace, and somehow she hadn't raised them to be bitter. She raised them to be bold. Alistair had come back looking for peace, but what he encountered was a kingdom that had flourished without his presence. That, in itself, was a lesson. Her phone buzzed, a message from Serenity. He looked like a ghost. But we're good. Love you. Then another from Trinity. Don't let him sleep too easy. Not yet. Jacqueline smirked. She replied with one emoji. Evening fell. The lights dimmed across the estate. Outside, the sky burned in deep oranges and fading violets. A breeze swept through the upper floor, rustling sheer curtains that whispered against the walls. Jacqueline walked to her bedroom, changed into a satin nightgown, and stood at her vanity, brushing her hair. Her reflection stared back, calm, but not cold. Not anymore. She glanced toward the hallway, toward the guest room door. Her body wanted rest, but her mind was playing scenes from another time. Rome, Vienna, the yacht off the Amalfi Coast, the way Alistair used to touch her like she was the crown on his empire. He had thrown it all away. And now? Now he slept in a room meant for visiting colleagues and out-of-town decorators. How poetic. Meanwhile, Alistair couldn't sleep. The bed beneath him was too soft, too clean. The sheets smelled too expensive, and the silence made everything louder in his mind. Every word Trinity said echoed. Every disappointed look from Serenity twisted deeper. But Jacqueline? She was unreadable. That terrified him more than anything. He rose from bed and walked to the window. The estate was quiet. Her garden glowed under moonlight. Once, he'd helped her design that garden. She'd insisted on roses and cypress trees. He'd wanted sleek concrete and glass sculptures. She won. And she was right. He closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, but the peace didn't come. Not yet. 1:16 a.m. Jacqueline stirred awake. Not fully, but enough. Something moved in her subconscious. Some internal thread pulling her out of sleep like an invisible hand. She sat up slowly, listened. Nothing. Then, footsteps. Quiet. She reached for her robe, slid it over her shoulders, and stepped out. Alistair stood in the hallway, staring at a framed photo on the wall. It was the three of them, Jacqueline, Serenity, Trinity, standing in front of the Paris office of her firm. All three wore black suits, sunglasses, and matching grins. Jacqueline had never looked prouder. "You had that taken without me even in the frame," he said quietly. Jacqueline stepped beside him. "No," she replied. "You removed yourself from it." He turned to face her. "They're incredible. I know. I don't expect them to forgive me. Good, because they won't. Not yet. I want to matter to them. Even if it's just a little." Jacqueline's lips thinned. "You want to matter?" "I do." She stepped closer. "Then prove it." He blinked. "How?" "Be consistent. Be quiet. Be present. And never ask them to carry your guilt." Alistair nodded slowly. She studied him. His eyes were softer now, not the eyes of a predator, not even a broken man. Just someone stripped of armor. "You hungry?" she asked. He blinked. "Now." She turned. "Follow me." In the downstairs kitchen, Jacqueline moved like she owned every square inch of space, which of course she did. Alistair sat at the island counter, watching her pull a few leftovers from the fridge: pasta, grilled chicken, roasted vegetables. She plated everything with care, not for him, but because that's who she was. She set the plate in front of him. "Eat." He took the fork and began to. She poured herself another glass of wine and leaned against the sink, watching him in silence. After a few bites, he said, "You still cook like a queen. I still run a kingdom." He looked up. "That you do." Silence again. Then, "You've changed," he said. Jacqueline tilted her head. "And you haven't?" "No, I mean, you've grown, sharper, stronger, more magnetic." She sipped her wine. "I had to be. You walked out and left me with mouths to feed and a business to scale. I know. You lost your empire, Alistair. I built mine." He nodded. "And now I'm asking for scraps." "No, you're asking for access. And I haven't said yes." She set the glass down and walked toward him. He stood up. Their bodies were only inches apart now. She looked him in the eyes. "If I ever let you touch me again, it won't be out of pity. I wouldn't want it to be. It won't be out of nostalgia." He nodded. "Understood." She stepped closer. "It'll be because I want to claim what's mine, not what's broken, what's begging." His breath caught. "You think you're still mine?" He whispered. "I think," she said, pressing a single finger to his chest, You've never stopped being haunted by me." And then she walked away. Alistair didn't return to the guest room. He tried. He stood at the door, turned the knob, stepped in. But the silence inside that space felt louder than judgment, like guilt had settled into the cushions. Instead, he wandered back to the kitchen, replayed her words, replayed her finger pressing into his chest, replayed the way her voice didn't tremble, didn't rise, didn't see closure, because she already had it. He hadn't come back to fix things. Somewhere deep inside, he realized he'd come back because a part of him still belonged here, whether or not it was invited. He sat back at the counter, reached for the half-finished plate she'd made him, forked a cold bite into his mouth and chewed without tasting, then got up and rinsed the dish. Behind him, barefoot steps. Jacqueline. She wore a black slip dress now, barely clinging to her skin, her robe discarded somewhere. Her hair framed her face in soft waves, but her expression, unreadable. "You didn't sleep," she said, stepping to the fridge. "Couldn't," he replied. She pulled out a bottle of water, twisted the cap, and drank like the moment wasn't charged. Like their shared air wasn't thick with everything unsaid. He watched her throat move as she swallowed. She caught him looking. "What? You always did that when you were nervous," he said. She arched a brow. "What?" "Drink water. Avoid eye contact. Look like you were about to slap someone." She smirked. "That was usually because I was about to slap you." Silence. He stepped closer. "You remember Rome?" he asked. "No." "You're lying." She didn't deny it. He took another step. Now, only the island counter was between them. "That night we got caught in the rain," he said. "You were furious, screamed at the taxi driver, called me a fool for forgetting the umbrella. I was cold and wet and beautiful," he said. She met his eyes then. "You always tried to fix things with compliments." "No," he said gently. "I tried to fix things by holding you when you didn't want to be held. That was my problem. I never knew how to give you space. And now you're standing in mine." He didn't move. She put the water down. "Why did you really come back, Alistair?" "I told you. I lost everything." "No, that's why you had no options. That's not why you knocked on my door." He inhaled. "Because when the cancer diagnosis hit, the first name that came to mind wasn't my lawyer, wasn't my accountant, wasn't even my girlfriend." "Ex," Jacqueline corrected. He nodded. "Right, X. The first name was yours." Silence. She walked slowly around the counter. Her bare feet made no sound, but the intensity in the air was deafening. She stopped inches from him. "Say it," she demanded. He blinked. "Say what?" "Say what you're really here for." He swallowed. "I'm here because I never stopped needing you. I'm here because when I thought I was dying, the only face I wanted to see was the one I betrayed. I'm here because I'm still yours, whether you want me or not." Her breathing changed. Not faster, deeper. She studied him. And then, like a match to gasoline, she grabbed his face and kissed him. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was raw. He responded instantly. His hands found her waist, her hair, the back of her neck. She pulled back just an inch, her lips inches from his. "Don't speak, don't justify, don't ask permission." And then she kissed him again, harder. His hand slid down, gripping her thighs. She gasped against his mouth. He lifted her effortlessly and set her on the edge of the marble counter. Their mouths never broke contact. The electricity between them wasn't nostalgic. It was primal, the kind that only lives in people who've burned each other before. She yanked his shirt open, buttons flying. He groaned into her skin. "Jacqueline." She silenced him with her mouth again. "Don't you dare say my name like that," she hissed. "You forfeited that right." "Then give it back to me," he growled. "Let me earn it." Their mouths crashed together again, her legs wrapped around his waist. His lips moved down her neck. She whispered, "This doesn't mean anything." "I know," he said, "but it feels like everything." They lost themselves in that moment, stripping each other of pride, of silence, of grief. She bit his shoulder as he pressed deeper into her body. He buried his face in her hair as she clenched around him. They moved like storm and thunder, violent and unforgettable. Afterward, they lay on the cold floor, tangled in robes and sighs, their bodies slick and exhausted. But they didn't speak, because there was nothing to say. Not yet. The floor was cold. but her skin was hot, still humming from what they'd just done. Jacqueline lay on her back, chest rising and falling beneath the silk strap of her nightgown, now pushed down to her waist. Her legs were still loosely tangled around Alistair, who lay beside her, bare and quiet. His hand rested on his chest as if trying to calm his heartbeat, or silence his guilt. Neither spoke. The moonlight spilled through the glass panels of the kitchen ceiling. It highlighted the mess they'd made, clothes scattered across the floor, wineglass knocked sideways, breath still visible in the cool air of the post-storm night. Jacqueline shifted, her body sore in a way she hadn't felt in years, not just physically, emotionally, because her walls hadn't just cracked, they'd crumbled. She had kissed him, touched him, let him inside, and worse, she'd wanted it. "You left me," she whispered, eyes on the ceiling. Alistair's voice was ragged. "I know. 15 years, she said, turning to look at him. 15 years I've carried every question you never answered, every door you never knocked on. And tonight, I gave you more than you deserve." He didn't flinch. "I wasn't expecting this," he said quietly. "You weren't expecting to sleep with me." Her laugh was sharp. "You show up at my door soaking in regret, and thought I'd just give you a lecture. I'm not that tame." "No," he said, turning toward her. "You're fire. You always were." She pushed herself up, sitting on the floor, her back against the counter. She pulled the robe across her chest and tied it, but the way he looked at her didn't change. Still reverent, still haunted. "You know what scares me the most, Alistair?" she asked, eyes steady. "That it still felt right. It did. That when I touched you, I didn't feel disgust." He sat up too, leaning on one elbow. "I didn't come here for sex, Jacqueline. Of course not. You came here to break again, and I let you—" His eyes softened. "Don't say that." "Why not? It's the truth. That's all we've got now, isn't it? Truth and consequences." He looked away, jaw clenched. She leaned closer, voice low. "When you left, you didn't just abandon a wife. You deserted your daughters. You abandoned a legacy." He turned back to her. "I know. I can't undo it." "No," she snapped. "You can't. But what happens next? That's on you." Silence wrapped around them again. Then she said something that made him pause. "I wanted to hate you during it," she confessed. "But I didn't." Alistair's breath caught. "I thought about everything while you touched me," she continued. "The cheating, the betrayal, the silence. And still, my body betrayed me." He swallowed. "It betrayed me too." She laughed bitterly. "That's what makes this so dangerous, because we're still good at the wrong things." He moved closer. "But what if we could be good at the right things again?" Jacqueline stared at him, long and hard, then stood up. She walked to the sink and turned on the faucet, washing her hands as if cleansing more than skin. "Clean up the floor," she said over her shoulder. "Then go back to your room." Alistair didn't argue. He gathered the scattered clothing, folded her robe gently and placed it on a stool, and wiped the sweat from his forehead with a kitchen towel. By the time he looked up again, Jacqueline was gone. Upstairs she stood in the mirror, unblinking, not ashamed, not proud, just changed. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, like her body still pulsed with what just happened. Her fingers trembled, less from passion now, more from realization. She had cracked her own rule. She let a man back into a temple that had been rebuilt without him. Back in the guest room, Alistair stood by the window. He stared out at the garden, at the roses, at the moon above them both. He couldn't stop seeing her face when she'd gasped beneath him. Couldn't stop hearing the words she'd thrown at him after. He wasn't stupid. This wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even progress. It was exposure. She'd let him feel again, only to remind him of what he'd lost. Not because she needed it, but because she knew he did. The next morning came fast. Jacqueline didn't come down to greet him. The staff had already started cleaning up the kitchen by the time he made his way there. Nothing was left from the night before, except the faint outline of his handprint on the marble counter. He took a black coffee in silence, stared out the window, and waited for her voice. Instead, one of the staff brought him a handwritten note. "Today is not about us, it's about the girls. You'll speak when they speak, you'll listen when they bleed, and you won't flinch when they hold the knife. Jay." He folded the note slowly, slipped it into his pocket, and whispered, "Understood." The morning sun rose like it had no clue what happened the night before. A soft breeze fluttered through the open archways of the Bel Air estate, rustling the curtains and spreading warmth over every polished surface. The house looked pristine again, no evidence of sweat, rage, or regret. Just silence and sunlight. Jacqueline stood by the massive glass window in the atrium. She wore white again, not because it symbolized anything, just because it made her skin glow, and that morning she needed to remember who she was. She held her coffee cup with two hands, sipped slowly, eyes fixed on the driveway. Behind her, the entire estate was spotless. Cleaners had come and gone. The smell of lemon polish and fresh orchids filled the air. The past had been scrubbed away overnight, but the ache in her thighs reminded her, some things don't vanish with hot water. Upstairs, Alistair stood in front of the mirror in the guest bathroom. He shaved carefully, rinsed twice, used her lavender-scented aftershave like it was a prayer. He changed into slacks and a collared shirt Jacqueline had laid out for him weeks ago, before he became history. He didn't recognize the man in the mirror. His jaw looked softer, his eyes sunken, his body thinner than he remembered. But what shook him more was the humility in his reflection. It no longer looked like a man chasing redemption. It looked like someone finally surrendering to truth. Downstairs, Jacqueline was already on her second cup when he arrived. She didn't greet him, just pointed to the plate on the kitchen counter. Omelette, toast, berries. He sat. She didn't. He glanced at her. Thank you. She nodded, but didn't look at him. You don't owe me anything, he added. No, she agreed. But I owe my daughters a civilized morning. He said nothing after that. At 9:58 a.m., she checked her watch. They're never late, she said. She gave him a sideways glance. Serenity and Trinity. You didn't think only one would come, did you? He rubbed his palms together. No, I just forgot how powerful they are when they walk into a room together. He exhaled. Yes. Jacqueline walked to the foyer. Alistair followed. At exactly 10 a.m., the doorbell rang. She opened the door. The world tilted. Serenity and Trinity entered like a force of nature. This time, no suits, no armor, just two women in sleek dresses, hair tied back, heels sharp enough to slice through hesitation. Serenity wore navy blue. Trinity wore deep green. Both wore faces that didn't flinch. They stepped inside without hesitation. Without greeting him, Alistair stood by the stairs. He watched his daughters, his strangers, walk past him with the kind of regal presence he once paid models to mimic in campaigns. Serenity removed her sunglasses first. You look smaller, she said flatly. Trinity tilted her head. Are you sick or just hollow? Alistair cleared his throat. Stage 3, colon cancer. Serenity blinked. Ah, that explains the text, Trinity added. Jacqueline shut the door behind them. He's not here to be pitied. No, Serenity said. He's here to be measured. Alistair took a breath. I know you don't owe me anything. I know I left when I shouldn't have. I know I missed birthdays, milestones, everything. You missed the funeral, Trinity cut in. He froze. Jacqueline looked down. Serenity's tone didn't waver. Grandma, Mom's mom, you missed her funeral. She loved you, doted on you, held us when you left. I didn't know. That's the point, Trinity snapped. You didn't know. Because you were gone. He nodded. I'm sorry. You're always sorry when someone else has to remind you of your absence. Silence wrapped around the room like a tightrope. Then Serenity walked to the kitchen, pulled out a chair, and sat. Trinity followed. Jacqueline remained by the window, sipping her coffee, gaze fixed on the rose garden. Say what you came to say, Trinity said. Alistair moved slowly, sat across from them, palms open on the table. He didn't raise his voice, didn't dramatize. He simply spoke. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect to be called Dad. I came because I couldn't leave this world, if this is my time, without telling you I failed. Not because of you. Because I was weak, selfish, blind, and because I thought you'd forget me like I forgot myself. Serenity leaned back, arms folded. That's not how memory works. I know. You think we didn't see the headlines? Trinity asked. The yacht parties, the magazine covers with her on your arm. I remember, he said softly. Good. Because we remember, too. Another beat of silence. Then Serenity asked, "Why now? What made you care?" He looked at Jacqueline, then back at them. "When I was sitting in the hospital, alone, waiting for test results, I realized the empire I'd built couldn't sit beside me. The woman I left for wasn't even in the country, and all I could think about was how I abandoned the only people who might have held my hand." Jacqueline didn't move, but her silence weighed the most. Serenity looked at Trinity. They shared something unspoken. Then Trinity turned back to him. "We'll think about it." Alistair's brow furrowed. "Think about what?" "Whether you're worth a second conversation," she said. "And whether this isn't just guilt in disguise," Serenity added. He nodded. "That's fair." Trinity stood. Serenity followed. They walked toward the door without touching him. Before stepping out, Serenity paused. "Nice house," she said, eyeing the marble and chandeliers. "Thanks," Alistair replied softly. She turned, met Jacqueline's gaze. "You built it well." Jacqueline gave a single nod. "It wasn't easy." Trinity opened the door. "We'll be in touch." And then, like wind, they were gone. The door closed with a soft but definitive click. Jacqueline didn't move. She kept her eyes on the rose garden beyond the window, the sunlight now bathing the petals in warmth. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass, unshaken, unsentimental, untouched by nostalgia. Behind her, Alistair exhaled like he'd been holding his breath the entire time. "She didn't call me Dad," he said softly. "No," Jacqueline replied. "And you shouldn't expect her to—" "I wasn't expecting anything," he murmured, stepping further into the room. "But hearing them speak to me like that—" "They spoke to you like adults," she cut in. "Like women who built themselves from pieces you left behind." Alistair sat down on the edge of the chaise near the window. His hands were still trembling. The sweat on his palms left faint prints on his slacks. "I thought they might scream or cry." Jacqueline turned. "You don't get to hope for emotional breakdowns. You lost access to their softness the moment you made them doubt their worth." Alistair blinked slowly. "I understand." She walked past him to the kitchen island, refilled her mug. "You still don't get it," she said, stirring cream into her coffee. "They didn't come to forgive you. They came to honor me." He looked up. "What do you mean?" "They came because I asked, because I told them I wouldn't let someone they shared blood with die without facing the truth. That's the only reason. I'm grateful they came." "They didn't do it for you," she repeated. "They did it for closure, for the little girls who once stood at the top of the stairs waiting for a father who never showed up." Alistair rubbed his face. "I have so much to make up for." "No," she said. "You can't make up for it. You can only move from it." He met her eyes. "Do I at least get a chance to try?" Jacqueline sipped her coffee. "They'll decide that. But don't ever assume you get to be called Dad again." He stood. Slowly, carefully, like the air around her might crack if he moved too fast. "Can I ask you something?" She raised an eyebrow. "Careful. When did you stop loving me?" Jacqueline didn't answer right away. She placed the mug down, turned to face him, and walked to the edge of the room. "It wasn't one moment," she said. "It was a slow burn, a dying ember." He waited. "It started when I heard your voice shift, when your text replies got shorter, when your gaze went elsewhere during dinner, when you stopped asking how the girls were doing at school." She paused. "It ended the day I realized I was praying for a man who had stopped believing in me. That's when I stopped." He closed his eyes, letting the words hit like waves. "But you still let me in last night," he whispered. "I let you in because sometimes the body remembers what the soul has forgotten. That doesn't mean I love you. It means I reclaim the part of me you tried to leave behind." He exhaled. "You've changed." She smirked. "No, I evolved." Later that afternoon, Jacqueline sat on the patio overlooking the city. Alistair sat across from her, a journal in his lap. He had started writing again, something he hadn't done in years. But this time it wasn't strategy plans or speeches. It was letters. One to Serenity, one to Trinity. He hadn't written their names in so long, his hand trembled as he did it. But it was better than silence, better than avoiding the responsibility that now weighed on him like a new suit that didn't quite fit. Jacqueline watched him write. She didn't comment, didn't advise. She simply let him do it. Because this part wasn't hers. It was theirs. An hour later, he sealed the envelopes and set them on the tray beside her. "I'm not asking you to deliver them," he said. She didn't answer. I just needed to write. Even if they never read them. Still, she said nothing. He looked at her again. You really did raise queens. Jacqueline's lips twitched. Of course I did. They came from me. He nodded. They remind me of you. Then they'll be just fine. He picked up his tea, took a slow sip, looked out over the view. This house, he said, is bigger than our old one. Jacqueline turned her head. It's not the size that matters. It's the energy. This one breathes. I noticed. You feel it because you don't belong here. He paused. She stood, collected the letters, and turned away. Maybe one day, he said, they'll call me something more than a mistake. Jacqueline stopped. Without turning back, she replied, maybe one day you'll earn a name that matters. And with that, she disappeared inside. It was just past 6 in the evening when the second knock came, softer this time. Not like Alistair's, not hesitant, not desperate, intentional. Jacqueline didn't need to ask who it was. She opened the front door and found her daughters standing there again, less formal this time. Serenity had on distressed jeans and a black crop jacket. Trinity wore sneakers, no makeup, glasses on. Still radiant, still poised, still royalty. They stepped inside like they owned the ground. And in a way, they did. Jacqueline hugged them both without saying a word, held them longer than usual. Trinity pulled back first. Is he still here? Yes, Jacqueline replied. He's in the study. Writing again. Serenity raised a brow. Journaling? Jacqueline nodded. Letters. He says they're for you. Serenity looked at Trinity. Trinity shrugged. Let's see if his pen has more courage than his mouth. They found him sitting on the leather couch in the study. A fountain pen resting beside an open page. 2 sealed envelopes placed neatly beside him. His back straightened when they walked in. But he didn't stand. Instead, he offered a soft, "Hi." Trinity walked to the table and picked up one of the letters. Handwritten, she noted. Serenity crossed her arms. Bold move. He nodded. It felt necessary. They didn't sit, just stood there, staring down at the man who'd once walked out without a glance. Alistair didn't beg, didn't ramble. I know I can't erase the past. I won't even try. But these letters, what's inside them, aren't apologies. They're acknowledgments of what I missed, of who you became, of the mothers you'll be someday, the leaders you already are. I wanted you to read them when no one's watching. When the noise fades, Serenity tilted her head. And what do you expect after we read them? Nothing, he said. Nothing but honesty, however you choose to deliver it. Jacqueline leaned in the doorway, watching, not interfering. The twins exchanged a glance. Can we read them now? Trinity asked. He nodded. Of course. They moved to opposite chairs and opened the envelopes in silence. Jacqueline turned and walked away, giving them privacy. The study stayed quiet for 20 minutes. Just the rustling of paper and the occasional sharp inhale. Alistair didn't speak. He just sat, palms folded in his lap, heart drumming in his ears. When they finished, they didn't cry, didn't smile. They simply stared at the man in front of them with new, unspoken measurements in their eyes. Serenity broke the silence. You remembered my favorite color. Alistair blinked. Of course. In the letter, she clarified. You mentioned it. The blue dress I wore to my first recital. You described the way I ran off stage and jumped into Mom's arms. Trinity added, you remembered my science project in 5th grade. I still have the photos, he said quietly. That year was when you stopped coming home, Trinity said. He nodded. I thought you had forgotten, she continued. I tried to, he replied, because remembering made it harder to justify what I did. Serenity's arms dropped to her sides. Well, we read the letters. So now what? That's up to you. Trinity stood, walked over to Jacqueline, who was in the living room with her legs tucked beneath her on the sofa. She handed her mother the letter. I don't want to keep it. Jacqueline took it without question. Serenity walked over to Alistair and placed hers on the table. You don't get to write your way back into our lives, she said. I know, but... She paused, looking him over again. It's a start. Alistair met her eyes, stunned. Thank you. I didn't say I forgive you, she added. I said I see the effort. He nodded. That was more than he expected. Trinity chimed in. Keep writing. Not for us, for yourself. Learn who you were. and why we became who we are. I will. They turned toward the door again, but Serenity paused at the archway and glanced at Jacqueline. Mom? Yes? Can we stay for dinner? Jacqueline smiled faintly. You don't have to ask. The four of them sat around the long dining table for the first time in 15 years. Jacqueline at the head, Serenity and Trinity on either side. Alistair across from her. Dinner was grilled salmon, couscous, and asparagus. Light, but elegant. Jacqueline poured herself a glass of wine, poured water for the others. No one prayed. No one needed to. The silence at the table wasn't heavy. It was honest. It was earned. At one point, Alistair chuckled under his breath. Serenity looked up. What? He smiled. I just never thought I'd get to sit at a table like this again. Trinity stabbed a piece of fit. He smiled. I just never thought I'd get to sit at a table like this again. Trinity stabbed a piece of fish. Don't get comfortable. We're still watching. Of course, he replied. After dinner, the girls helped clear the plates. Alistair tried to assist, but Serenity waved him off. Go rest. You look tired. He nodded and stepped out onto the back patio, letting the breeze cool his thoughts. Jacqueline watched him go, then turned to her daughters. You didn't have to stay, she said. Serenity rinsed a plate. We know, but you did. Trinity smiled. You raised us to know the difference between hate and boundaries. Jacqueline blinked. Serenity dried her hands. Besides, this isn't for him. This is for us. Jacqueline kissed both their foreheads before walking away. Out on the patio, Alistair sat beneath the stars. He didn't speak, didn't plan, didn't scheme. He just sat. For the first time in years, he wasn't running toward an empire or away from guilt. He was just sitting still, and inside that house, behind that glass, 3 women sat on a couch, laughing about something he couldn't hear. But he didn't feel excluded. He felt lucky to be near them at all. Morning light crept in slowly, spilling across the living room like it was trying to tread softly. But the truth was, nothing about this morning would be soft. Not after what was coming. Jacqueline stood in the kitchen, already dressed in a gray blouse and fitted slacks. Her hair was pinned back. Her heels clicked with purpose as she moved. She wasn't hosting anymore. She was preparing. Alistair stood at the far end of the kitchen island, coffee untouched, spine straight. He could feel it. Something was shifting. The girls had stayed the night. That had been unexpected. But this morning was about honesty, about heat without screaming, about truths that had teeth. Jacqueline glanced at him. You still want this? She asked. Alistair didn't pretend not to know what she meant. I need it, he said, even if it burns. Good, she replied, because they don't speak to fill silence. They speak to make you feel every second you were gone. 30 minutes later, Serenity and Trinity joined them in the atrium. Trinity wore jeans and a black turtleneck. Hair in a ponytail. No makeup. Just clarity. Serenity wore a deep red blazer, gold hoops, and boots that hit the floor like authority. They sat across from Alistair. Jacqueline didn't sit. She stood behind them. Silent. Watchful. Serenity was the first to speak. I don't do slow walks into pain. So let's start from the top. Alistair gave a slow nod. Go ahead. Why did you leave? Alistair shifted slightly. Because I was chasing validation. I let my ego convince me that I deserved more. More than a wife who built you? Trinity asked. He looked at her. More than I earned. More than I appreciated. Serenity leaned forward. You didn't just disappear from a marriage. You disappeared from fatherhood. You didn't write. You didn't call. You didn't show up. I was ashamed, he admitted. And I was a coward. Jacqueline didn't move. But her silence was louder than anything said. Trinity interlocked her fingers. I used to wait at the window every Saturday morning. I memorized the sound of engines, hoped every SUV was yours. Serenity added, I used to fake headaches at school just so Mom would pick me up early. I thought maybe, if I was sick, you'd show up. Alistair pressed his hands together. I don't have a defense. I only have acknowledgement. I failed you. Serenity's eyes narrowed. And now? Now, I want to listen, to be present, even if you never accept me. I want you to see that I'm not running anymore. Trinity stood suddenly and walked to the window, her back to them. Her voice was steady, but low. Do you know what it's like to grow up questioning your own worth? To look in the mirror and wonder what you did to make your father vanish? Alistair rose slowly from his seat. I didn't leave because of you, he said. I left because I was too weak to face what you both represented. Love that held me accountable. Trinity turned to him. Then prove that weakness isn't all that's left. I intend to. Jacqueline walked forward, her tone even. This isn't a redemption arc, she said. This is reality. You don't get to cry your way back into their lives. You get to show up and stay, quietly, without expectation. Alistair nodded. Serenity folded her arms. One step, that's all you get. And if you mess it up, don't come back again. He didn't flinch. Understood. Trinity returned to her seat. You want a relationship? You start by learning who we are now, not who you imagined we'd be. He looked between them. Tell me. Serenity smiled faintly. I'm the creative director of my own fashion house. Built it from scratch. Started with 10 clients. I now supply to 5 major retailers. Trinity added, and I'm a lead researcher in gene therapy. My name's on 3 patents. I've testified before congressional panels. He blinked, stunned. You've done all that? Serenity's voice sharpened. Without you. Alistair breathed in, slowly. I'm proud. Beyond words. Don't be proud from a distance, Trinity said. Show it. In action. I will. The mood shifted. Just slightly. From sharp edges to cautious ground. Jacqueline walked past the girls and sat beside Alistair. Her voice was calm. You know what they need more than apology? He looked at her. Consistency, she said. Letters, check-ins. Not every day, but often enough to remind them you're trying. He nodded. Then I'll write. I'll call. I'll keep showing up. Serenity grabbed her phone and tapped a few buttons. I'm sending you a schedule, she said. Trinity added, bi-weekly video calls, one-on-one, alternating. If you're late, we block your number. Fair, he replied. Jacqueline smiled faintly. Well done, ladies. Serenity leaned back. We're not interested in fairy tales, just facts. And the fact is, Trinity said, we're giving you rope. What you do with it is your story. Alistair exhaled deeply. Thank you. Jacqueline stood again. That concludes today's reckoning, she said. And just like that, they stood, walked out of the room, and left him there, tired, breathless, but finally, accountable. The house had never felt more alive. Not loud, not chaotic, just electric. Jacqueline stood in the kitchen, watching her daughters from across the room. Trinity on the couch, laptop open, answering emails without missing a beat. Serenity on a call, pacing by the window, gesturing lightly as she discussed inventory deadlines and brand collaborations. These weren't girls anymore. They were self-made forces, and they became that way in the absence of the man now sitting silently at the dining table. Alistair kept his eyes down, fingers interlaced, jaw clenched, not in pride, in shame. He watched them move, 2 powerful women who didn't owe him anything, yet still shared his blood, and he couldn't help but ask himself the question again. Where was I when all of this was being built? The answer never changed. Gone. He was gone. Trinity closed her laptop and walked into the kitchen. She grabbed a bottle of water and leaned on the counter, facing her mother. Was I always this intense? She asked with a smirk. Jacqueline grinned. You were born focused. Serenity ended her call and joined them. And I was born loud. You were born fabulous, Jacqueline corrected. Alistair stayed quiet. They ignored him for a moment, not out of malice, but because the world didn't revolve around him anymore. He was no longer the sun. At best, he was a passing cloud trying to learn where to float. Finally, Serenity turned to him. You weren't there when we got accepted into college. He nodded. I know. You didn't see our first apartments, the internships, the heartbreaks. I read about your firm in a business journal, he offered. Trinity raised an eyebrow. And that counts for what? Nothing, he admitted. It only reminded me what I missed. Jacqueline sipped her tea in the corner, watching it unfold. Serenity pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Do you know how we survived? He looked up. Your mother? No, Trinity said, walking over. We survived each other. Alistair blinked. Trinity sat next to her sister. When I had no one to walk me across the stage for my master's ceremony, Serenity flew in the night before to be there. And when I got my first press attack in the media, Serenity added, Trinity handled my entire crisis PR in 48 hours. Alistair's throat tightened. They didn't just grow up, Jacqueline said quietly. They grew into everything you forfeited. He turned to her. You did that. No, she corrected. We did, the three of us. Together. He swallowed hard. And I was what? The footnote? You were the warning label, Trinity said. On everything we trusted too quickly. Silence. Serenity's voice softened. But you know what, Alistair? We're not broken. We're brilliant, not in spite of you. But because we decided we'd never need someone who left. Alistair nodded slowly. You have every right to feel that way. Jacqueline stood straighter. They don't feel that way. They lived it. Later that afternoon, the three women sat in the backyard garden. Alistair remained indoors, giving them space. Jacqueline poured iced tea for everyone and leaned back into the cushions. Serenity stretched out in the lounge chair. You really let him stay in the guest room? I did. Trinity stirred her tea. Why? Because he came empty, Jacqueline replied. No pride, no agenda, just broken. Good, Serenity said. He deserves to sit in what he destroyed. Trinity glanced at her mother. Did you really sleep with him? Jacqueline didn't flinch. Yes. They didn't gasp. They didn't judge. They just nodded. Needed closure? Trinity asked. No. I needed control, Jacqueline said plainly. And I took it. Serenity tilted her head. Did it help? Jacqueline smiled slightly. It reminded me I was never the weak one. The daughters looked at each other. Then Serenity said, We got that from you. Back inside, Alistair stood at the window, watching them laugh. Not at him. Not about him. Just living. And it stung. In the way it should. Because he had removed himself from the story. And they had continued writing anyway. He wasn't the author. He wasn't even the editor. He was the forgotten prologue they'd outgrown. But instead of resenting it, he admired it. Because they didn't just survive. They became everything he hadn't had the courage to be. He sat at the dining table once more, opened his journal, began a new letter. Not to Serenity, not to Trinity. This one was to Jacqueline. Dear Jacqueline, watching you today made me understand something I've never admitted, not even to myself. You didn't become powerful after I left. You always were. I just never had the strength to stand beside someone who didn't need me. You raised women who could lead nations, who could crack ceilings, who could command rooms. And you did it without ever cursing my name to them. That's a level of grace I'll never deserve. But I see it now. I see you. And if I fade again tomorrow, I hope you remember this. You weren't the woman I left behind. You were the empire I abandoned. And I am humbled by what you've built. He set the pen down, closed the book, and wiped the corner of his eyes with the back of his hand. Dinner was quiet. Not tense, just intentional. The plates were set, the food was warm, and the silence between courses was filled with observation rather than conversation. Alistair didn't try to dominate the table. He served himself last, spoke only when spoken to, watched his daughters laugh with their mother, watched them lean into each other, his rhythms, and kept his hands neatly folded on the table between bites. He was learning that love isn't earned through eloquent speeches or grand gestures. It's earned by being small enough to listen and brave enough to stay. Trinity passed him the pepper shaker. That was it. No smile, no warmth, just the gesture. But it meant something, because a week ago she wouldn't have even looked at him. Now, she was acknowledging him, however small. He received it like a gift. After dinner, Serenity gathered the dishes. Trinity helped. Alistair stood to assist, but Serenity raised a hand. We've got it. He nodded, stepping back. Jacqueline watched him. She said nothing. 20 minutes later, they all sat in the lounge. No wine, just water and a bowl of grapes passed around as if sharing fruit was suddenly symbolic. Trinity sat forward. Here's what's going to happen. Alistair leaned in, attentive. We'll allow one call a week, 5 minutes each, no speeches, no begging, just updates. Anything longer, Serenity cut in, and we hang up. Alistair nodded. Understood. You'll get our emails, Trinity continued. But don't flood them. If we don't respond, don't double text, don't guilt us. I won't. You'll show up when invited, not before, not with surprises, Serenity added. He glanced at Jacqueline, then back at them. Thank you. For setting boundaries, Trinity nodded. We're not trying to rebuild a relationship. We're creating new rules for future contact. And we reserve the right to stop at any time, Serenity said. Fair. Trinity leaned back, arms crossed. One more thing. Yes? Don't expect to be called Dad. The word landed with a quiet punch. He didn't flinch. I won't expect it, he said. But I'll still earn it, every day, even if you never use it. The sisters exchanged a look. Then Serenity smiled faintly. That's the first real thing you've said all night. The moment shifted. Still not tender, but less cold. A middle ground. A possibility. Jacqueline stood. I'm going to bed. Don't stay up late. Serenity replied. We're grown. Jacqueline raised a brow. And still under my roof tonight. They all chuckled. Yes, even Alistair. Trinity looked at her watch. We'll head out tomorrow. Got a 9 a.m. board meeting. I'll have the driver ready, Jacqueline said. Serenity stretched. Thanks for the food, Mom, and for whatever this is. It's not a reunion, Trinity added. It's a start. Alistair stayed seated as they stood. He didn't follow them to the stairs. Didn't beg for hugs. But he did speak. Thank you, both of you. They paused. Serenity looked over her shoulder. Rest. That chemo schedule won't be easy. I'm ready, he said. Trinity nodded once. Good night. And with that, they disappeared up the stairs. Alistair stayed in the lounge for a long while after. He stared at the wall, then out the window. Finally, he whispered to himself, Not Dad, not yet, but still here. Upstairs, Jacqueline stood in her bedroom doorway, watching her daughters talk in the hallway. It was a quiet chatter. Nothing dramatic. Just the soft harmony of two women who had been through fire together and came out dressed in armor. She stepped inside her room and closed the door. Behind her, the house pulsed with possibility. Not peace, not forgiveness, but the fragile beginning of something that could grow, if protected. Alistair returned to the guest room. He sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the phone in his hand. He scrolled through his own contact list. Years of names, most of them useless now. Investors, lawyers, celebrities. None of them mattered. Then he opened the notepad app and typed just 3 words. Be worth calling. He locked the screen, lay down, and for the first time in years he fell asleep without fear. If this chapter showed you that some names must be earned, drop Not Dad, not yet, in the comments. And if you're watching with your whole heart, smash that like button, subscribe, and stay with us. The best is still ahead. The morning was crisp, the kind that whispered renewal without needing permission. Jacqueline walked barefoot across the stone path of her garden, her robe flowing behind her, like it belonged to a queen, not just a woman who'd rebuilt her life one battle at a time. The roses were in full bloom, deep crimson, pale pink, bold white. Each flower a declaration of resilience. She crouched beside a bed of lavender and brushed her fingers along the tips. It had taken her years to get this garden right. Soil tests, light angles, seasonal shifts. Funny, it took less time than healing from Alistair. Behind her, the glass door slid open. Alistair stepped out quietly, dressed in sweats and a hoodie. He didn't want to interrupt, but she turned anyway. You're up early, she said. Couldn't sleep, he replied. You. I slept fine. They stood in silence for a moment. The sun wasn't too hot yet, just warm enough to make the breeze feel like a balm. This is beautiful, he said, scanning the landscape. You always said you wanted your own garden. I said I wanted control over what bloomed in my space, she corrected. He nodded slowly. You got it. Jacqueline stood. It didn't come easy. I didn't think it did. She brushed her hands together and turned to him fully. Why are you out here, Alistair? He didn't answer right away. Because I didn't know how to ask if I could walk with you. She looked at him, long and unblinking, then gave a nod. They walked side by side through the garden, feet crunching lightly on gravel. For a while, they didn't talk. The silence wasn't awkward, it was purposeful. It gave space for thought to stretch its legs. Alistair finally spoke. I remember when you used to garden on the balcony of our old apartment. Jacqueline chuckled. With 2 plastic planters in terrible light, and you still got those tomatoes to grow. Because I didn't give up on them. He paused. You gave up on me, though. She stopped walking. Her voice dropped. No, Alistair, I didn't give up on you. I gave up waiting for you to come back. He lowered his head. That's fair. She pointed at a corner patch of the garden. The roses there were shorter, still catching up with the others. Those almost died last year, she said. Overwatered them, tried too hard. Alistair followed her gaze. Thought I could force them to thrive if I just gave them enough attention. What changed? I left them alone, pruned, waited, let the soil breathe. He studied her face, and they came back. Eventually, silence. Then she turned and kept walking. They reached the bench at the edge of the garden, overlooking the hills. She sat. He followed. The air was still. Birds sang softly in the trees. Jacqueline looked ahead. I'm not angry anymore, she said. He looked at her. I was. For a long time. At you, at myself, at the world. You had every right. I still do, she said. But I've outgrown the need to carry it. He let out a shaky breath. Do you regret it? He asked. Letting me in last week? She shook her head. No. Even after. No, she repeated. Because you needed to see me as I am now, and I needed to remind myself I never needed saving. His eyes filled. I've missed this version of you, he whispered. This version of me, she said, was born after you left. They sat there a while longer, letting the sun rise higher, letting the silence do what words couldn't. When she finally stood, he did too. She faced him. You want forgiveness? He didn't speak. You won't get it in one conversation, or 10, or 100. You'll get it in time, in action, in repetition. You'll get it by showing up when it's hard, when no one is clapping. I understand. And you won't always get praise for doing the right thing now, she added, because you missed your chance when it mattered most. I'll still do it, he said. Good. She paused. Because Serenity and Trinity are not little girls anymore. They don't need a father. They need a man who respects their boundaries and honors their strength. I want to be that man. Then start walking like it. She stepped past him and returned to the path, her pace steady, unbothered. Alistair stayed behind for a second longer, then turned and followed, not too close, not too far, just close enough to prove he was still trying. The house was still again. Not like it had been before, silent with wounds. Now it was silent with choices. Jacqueline stood in front of the mirror brushing her hair. The light from her bedroom was warm, golden, soft. Her silk robe clung to her hips, the tie loose. She wasn't dressing up for anyone. She wasn't trying to impress. She was preparing for another confrontation, with herself. Because after everything, she still felt it. Not love, not hate, desire, but different from before. It wasn't fueled by bitterness or nostalgia now. It came from owning her body, her choices, not giving anything away, but choosing, intentionally. When she turned to face the hallway, she already knew he'd be there. Alistair stood outside her door like a man unsure if he belonged to the moment or was trespassing against it. He didn't knock, didn't lean. He just waited. She opened the door. Their eyes met. She didn't say a word, just stepped aside. And he walked in. This time, there was no scramble of hands, no fevered gasps. He didn't reach for her. She didn't pull him in. They just stood in the soft glow of the lamp, watching each other breathe. Then, slowly, Jacqueline untied her robe and let it fall to the floor. Underneath, nothing but skin and ownership. Not invitation, command. Alistair didn't move. His throat worked, but no words came. I'm not doing this for you, she said plainly. I'm doing this for me. He nodded. I know. She walked to the bed and sat on the edge, crossing one leg over the other. Strip. He obeyed. Not quickly, not showy, just honest. Layer by layer, shedding what he used to be. When he stood bare before her, she didn't blink. She reached out, placed her hand over his chest, felt the heartbeat. You said you missed this version of me, she whispered. I do. Then prove it, by staying in the moment. When their bodies met this time, there was no battle, no revenge, only reverence. He kissed her neck slowly. She let her head fall back, eyes closed. He moved down her body like he was memorizing terrain he thought he'd never see again. And she let him. Because tonight, she wasn't looking to erase the past. She was confronting it, with full awareness of her power. They didn't rush. They explored. Breath met breath. Hip met hip. Every movement deliberate. Her fingers laced through his as he entered her again. Not like before. Not like someone trying to beg for belonging. Like someone finally understanding what it meant to be allowed. She guided his face to hers. Say nothing. He nodded. And they moved together until the moans came unfiltered. Until the tremors took over. Until the only thing left between them was sweat, breath, and something deeper than apologies. When they collapsed beside each other, Jacqueline didn't pull away. But she didn't curl into him either. She lay on her back, chest rising and falling, arms folded behind her head like she owned the ceiling. Alistair lay beside her, hands over his stomach, staring at the same spot. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "You can sleep here tonight, but don't mistake this for anything. It's not." "I won't," he said. "You're still on trial." He nodded. "But," she added, "you passed today." He turned to her. "What changed?" "You stopped begging," she said. "You started listening." Another silence. Then, "Thank you for tonight," he whispered. Jacqueline smiled faintly in the dark. "Don't thank me." "Why not?" "Because you didn't earn me. I gave me, to myself." By morning the bed was empty. Jacqueline sat on the edge, wrapped in a white shawl, legs crossed, tea in hand. The sun filtered gently through sheer drapes, brushing gold across her skin. Her expression wasn't dreamy. It was resolved. There were no what-ifs spinning in her mind, no fantasies of reconciliation. Last night was not about return. It was about reclamation. Alistair stood on the terrace just outside the room. He hadn't left, physically, but he hadn't assumed anything either. His shirt was back on, his shoes placed neatly by the door. He watched the city below, but he wasn't above it anymore. Jacqueline stepped into the doorway, barefoot, quiet. "You want to talk?" she asked. "Only if you do." "I don't," she said, sipping her tea. "I want you to listen." He turned, attentive. She sat on the chaise and faced him directly. "You were the chapter that taught me how to love a man who didn't love himself." He swallowed hard. "You were the heartbreak that turned me into the architect of my own joy. I see that now. I used to think I needed closure. That maybe if you came back with the right words, I'd feel whole again." He waited, but I was already whole. Long before that knock on my door. He nodded, eyes stinging. She tilted her head. "You asked me when I stopped loving you." He braced for impact. "I didn't stop," she said softly. "I outgrew it." Silence. Heavy. Final. But not cruel. Jacqueline set her tea down. "You were a man I once followed," she said. "But I became a woman who leads, who builds, who protects. You don't get to rewrite that." "I wouldn't dare." "Good." She leaned forward. "I'm not your unfinished story, Alistair. I'm not a chapter waiting for a sequel." She stood. "I'm the book now, the whole book." He stood too, slowly. "I'm sorry I didn't see that sooner." Jacqueline walked past him. "I'm not," she said, "because if you had, I might not have written it." Later that day, Alistair packed his things without being asked. No drama, no hesitation. He folded the robe she gave him, placed the towels in the hamper, tidied the guest room until it looked untouched. Downstairs, Jacqueline sat at the long dining table, reviewing building schematics. She didn't look up when he entered. He stopped at the end of the table. "I'll have the car take you to the center for your treatment," she said without lifting her gaze. "The driver knows the address." "Thank you." She nodded. He didn't say goodbye. She didn't offer one. He walked to the door, paused, then turned back. "You raise legends," he said. She looked up. "I raised them without you." He nodded. "And I became something better because of that." She didn't smile, but she didn't stop him either. Outside, as the car pulled away, Alistair looked back at the estate one last time. He didn't see a house. He saw a woman, a mother, a leader, a story he was never meant to finish, only learn from. Inside, Jacqueline stood in the atrium, hand resting on the doorframe. She whispered to herself, "Not every story needs a reunion. Some just need a reckoning." She returned to her laptop and kept building. The clinic walls were pale, not cold, not sterile, just quiet, like they'd seen everything and judged nothing. Alistair sat in the infusion chair with a warm blanket over his knees, an IV dripping slowly into his arm. He was on week 2 of chemotherapy. Fatigue clung to his bones, not just physical, existential. But there was something new on his lap, a notebook, the same one Jacqueline had seen in the garden. He flipped to a clean page, dated it, "Dear Serenity, I saw your campaign ad today. The way you stood in front of that camera, chin up, eyes steady, it stopped me cold. You're a leader. You walk like you know where the world is going, and that's because you've already built your lane. I missed the beginning. But I'm still watching now." He paused, then turned to the next page. "Dear Trinity, I saw your interview about the gene editing trial. You said science doesn't just solve, it redeems." I had to close the screen and breathe. I don't know if you meant it metaphorically, but it pierced me. You're out here saving lives. I couldn't even show up for mine. He closed the notebook. No one clapped, no one comforted, but he felt a strange warmth crawling through the ache in his chest. He didn't write to be thanked. He wrote to be truthful. That alone was new. 2 days later, Serenity opened her mailbox and found the envelope. Real ink, real paper. Her name written in deliberate strokes. She didn't open it right away. She placed it on her desk, looked at it during Zoom calls, side-eyed it while brushing her hair. By midnight, she cracked the seal. Inside, no guilt, no drama. Just a man trying to acknowledge a daughter without asking for anything back. She folded the letter, placed it in her drawer, and went to bed without crying. But her chest? It felt less heavy. Across town, Trinity received hers too. She read it in the car between appointments, closed it halfway through, then reopened it the moment she parked. She shook her head after reading the final line, and for the first time in years, she didn't see his face and think absence. She saw effort, still clumsy, still late, but it was something. Back at the clinic, Alistair sat through another session. This time, he brought a book of poetry Jacqueline once gave him for their anniversary. She had inscribed it then. For when words fail and you still want to be understood, he finally understood what she meant. That evening, he sent a voice note to both of them. Not a call, not a video, just a brief message. No pressure to respond. Just wanted to say, I hope your days were strong. You don't owe me anything, but I'm here if you ever want to talk. He hit send, closed the app, went to bed, didn't stare at the phone, didn't wait, just let it go. 3 days passed, no response. Then, a ping from Serenity. That voice note was surprisingly normal. Thanks. He smiled, didn't reply, let her hold the last word. Then, a day later, another ping, this time from Trinity. For your information, I'm forwarding you a list of books on emotional intelligence. Start with chapter 3. Don't skip. Alistair burst out laughing, because it wasn't sarcasm. It was instruction. That meant progress. Meanwhile, Jacqueline sat in her office reviewing site plans for a sustainable housing complex in Miami. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down. A photo from Trinity. It was a screenshot of Alistair's letter, annotated in the margins. He actually mentioned Grandma's quilt. He remembers more than I thought. Jacqueline typed back. Memory is cheap. Action is expensive. Watch what he does next. Trinity replied. Still watching, but I didn't hate it. Jacqueline smiled, then went back to her blueprint. That night, Alistair lit a candle beside his window. Not to be symbolic, just to watch the flicker. He picked up the notebook again. No letters this time, just a note to himself. Healing is learning to crawl again in a house you once set on fire. He closed it gently and slept, not deeply, but without shame. It started with a meme, a simple image Serenity texted to Alistair one morning. A photo of a man in a suit holding a bouquet of flowers behind his back, with the caption, when you ghosted her in 2008, but come back in 2023 with a diagnosis and new vocabulary. Alistair read it twice, then laughed so hard he choked on his tea. He didn't reply, not right away. Instead, he screenshotted it, printed it out at the clinic printer, and taped it to the inside of his journal. Underneath, he wrote in pen, when she makes fun of you, it means she's considering forgiving you. The next day, he responded with his own version, a stock image of a disheveled man holding a coffee cup labeled, trying to become emotionally available at 60 like it's not too late. Serenity replied with a thumbs up and the words, don't get cocky, Romeo. But that was the first time in 15 years she called him anything other than Alistair. Even if it was a jab, it was something. Meanwhile, Trinity didn't do jokes. She did accountability. She sent him a link to a podcast about self-repair, followed it with a bullet-pointed summary, then a calendar invite. Sunday, 2 p.m. Virtual check-in. Bring answers, not excuses. Alistair showed up 10 minutes early. Hair combed, notes in hand. She opened the Zoom call wearing a hoodie and blue light glasses. "Didn't think you'd accept," she said. "I didn't think you'd invite me," he replied. The call lasted 14 minutes. She gave him 3 questions. He answered 2 well. The third, "What does being a father mean now that you missed the foundational years?" He paused. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "But I want to find out by asking, not assuming." Trinity gave a tight nod. Acceptable. Then ended the call. No goodbye, but no hang-up rage either. Later that week, he received an email from her. The subject line, recommended reading list. Round 2, he opened it with a smile. That was her love language. Resources, expectations, structure. Serenity came next. She invited him, by group text, to attend her next product launch via livestream. The message read, "Don't text me during the event. Just clap from your house." He did. In fact, he bought 4 products from the line, had them shipped to Jacqueline's house with a handwritten note, "Not trying to buy your love. Just support your brilliance." She texted back 2 words, better response, no emoji. Still progress. Back at the clinic, the chemo rounds grew harder. His strength dipped. But his spirit? It was steadier than it had ever been. He journaled after every session, not just about the pain, about his regrets, about his memories, about the words Jacqueline once said, "You don't get to be loud in the room you abandoned." So he chose to speak softly and let time do the convincing. One evening, Jacqueline FaceTimed him. He was surprised. She never FaceTimed. He answered. Her face appeared, relaxed, no makeup, reading glasses on. "I'm not calling to chat," she said immediately. "I just need to ask something." "Go ahead. Did you send Serenity those items from her brand?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I believe in her work." Jacqueline studied his face. "You're not trying to leverage sentiment?" "No." "Then what's changed?" Alistair smiled faintly. "I've started building peace, not arguments." She didn't smile back, but she nodded. "You're learning," she said. "I have good teachers." The call ended with a quiet goodnight. No formality, no longing, just mutual stillness. That, to him, meant more than any embrace. Meanwhile, Serenity texted Trinity. "He's still not asking for anything, not even the title." Trinity replied, "Because he knows he's not ready." Then added, "But if he keeps showing up, maybe we'll let him knock on the door." Alistair stood at the window later that night, watching the moon. He didn't make a wish. He didn't whisper promises. He just stood still, grateful to be included in a day that didn't center around him. The day Jacqueline invited him to attend the twins' joint art gallery showcase. Alistair stared at the message like it was written in a different language. Opening night, 6 p.m., no speeches, just be present. No speeches, no permission to be the father of the year, just presence. He replied simply, "I'll be there, thank you." The gallery was an industrial loft turned into an explosion of color. Trinity's section featured framed blueprints, sketches, and thought maps, architecture as emotion. Serenity's wing overflowed with abstract canvases and digital installations, themes of absence, reconstruction, and resilience. Alistair walked in, unnoticed at first. Black suit, silver-rimmed glasses, a small pin on his lapel. Ask. Don't assume. Jacqueline spotted him. She didn't wave. She just tilted her chin slightly. That was enough. Trinity approached him at the cider table. Not smiling, but not tense. "Didn't think you'd come alone. I didn't think I needed an entourage to witness brilliance." Her lip twitched. "I don't do sentiment," she warned. "I don't expect it," he said. She nodded slowly, then gestured to one of her framed pieces, a concept sketch of a building in the shape of a cracked heart. "I submitted that when I was 18. Alistair studied it. "What's it called?" She looked at him carefully. "The foundation you forgot." He didn't flinch, didn't offer excuses, just said, "It's honest and beautiful." She looked away, but there was softness in the movement. Meanwhile, Serenity was across the room surrounded by guests and cameras. She was radiant, commanding, but when her eyes caught Alistair's, her expression didn't change. She didn't run toward him. She didn't cry, but she didn't look away either. He counted that as a miracle. After the showcase, the family gathered at a nearby lounge. It was private, elegant, and emotionally charged. Alistair sat quietly beside the fireplace while conversations swirled. Jacqueline brought him a glass of ginger tea. "I remember this helped your migraines," she said. "It still does," he replied, then softly added, "and so does hearing your voice." She didn't respond, but she didn't move either. The twins eventually sat beside him, one on each side. He didn't speak, just waited. Serenity broke the silence. "People keep asking what it's like having a billionaire father." Alistair chuckled. "What do you say?" "I tell them you're like a ghost that pays alimony and curiosity and awkward tea invites." Trinity laughed. Alistair smiled and turned to them. "I'm not trying to buy back years. I can't. I just want to be part of the now, even if it's in the back row." Trinity asked, "What if we never call you Dad?" He swallowed the lump in his throat. "Then I'll still show up, every time. As the man who wants to earn your trust, not your titles." They didn't reply, but they didn't leave either. Later that night, as everyone was getting ready to leave, Alistair stood by the exit. Jacqueline approached him. "You did well tonight. I just listened." She nodded, then hesitated. "They're watching you. Not for perfection, just for permanence." "I'm staying," he said. "I know." She paused, then added, "You're still their echo, Alistair, whether you like it or not. They'll carry the sound of your silence and your effort. Make sure they remember the right one." He exhaled deeply. A nod of reverence, not victory. That night, back in his home, Alistair opened his journal. He wrote just one line. "Echoes don't beg to be heard. They earn their return." The scent of sterile wipes, the hush of machines, the hum of controlled suffering. Chemo didn't feel like punishment. It felt like penance. Alistair sat in the infusion chair, an IV threading through the skin of a man once invincible. He wore a plain hoodie, no cufflinks, no cologne, just vulnerability. Around him, others sat quietly, some reading, some sleeping, most just surviving. There were no board meetings here, no executive assistants, no Mr. Hamilton greetings. Just his name on a clipboard, Alistair. Room 7C, Cycle 1. He didn't expect her to come, not because she wasn't kind, but because Jacqueline knew better than to show up when it served his pride. So when she walked in, tan trench coat, her curls pulled back, a book under her arm, he nearly looked away. But he didn't. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just pulled up a chair beside him. "Have you eaten?" she asked, unzipping a canvas lunch bag. He blinked. "You brought food?" "I brought balance. Ginger broth, crackers, tea, and no, I won't feed you. You still have hands." He laughed. It hurt to laugh, but it healed something deeper. They sat quietly as the IV beeped. Jacqueline read from her book softly. Something meditative, something lyrical. Not because he asked, but because she knew silence wasn't always soothing. At one point, Alistair closed his eyes, not from exhaustion, but trust. 2 hours later, the nurse removed the line. Alistair leaned back, breathing shallowly. Jacqueline folded the blanket around his legs. "Don't mistake this for anything else," she said. "I'm not here because I want you back. I know. I'm here because humans need witnesses, not saviors." He nodded, and for the first time, maybe in his life, he didn't try to make it about him. Outside, they walked side by side down the hospital corridor. She handed him a soft wool cap. "Your assistant forgot to pack this." He accepted it. "Thank you." Jacqueline turned to leave. "Jacqueline." She paused. "I was powerful when I built empires, but I didn't know real power until I lost control." She looked over her shoulder. "You never had control, you had convenience. And it walked out the day your wife did." She left him with that. A truth that cut cleaner than any scalpel. That night, in his journal, Alistair wrote, "Strength isn't in the structure, it's in the surrender." He returned for the second cycle alone. This time, he brought the wool cap. The broth. The book she once read from. He had underlined a passage. A man is not measured by what he builds, but by who he becomes when everything collapses. He was collapsing and becoming. On the third visit, Jacqueline returned, this time with a new bag, stainless steel cutlery, a small speaker playing lo-fi jazz, a bottle of electrolyte water. Still no smiles, just presence. He asked, "Why keep showing up?" She stirred the tea. "Because your daughters are watching." He blinked. "They need to see what dignity looks like, even in illness, even in you." That day, he cried, quietly, without shame, and she let him, not to pity him, but to free him. By the fourth cycle, Alistair started noticing things. The old man beside him, who always shook after infusions. The single mom across the aisle who whispered affirmations to herself. The nurse with the cracked glasses who brought humor like it was medicine. He began showing up early, not to be the first served, but to say, "You good?" To pass around tea, to remember names. He became a mirror of the woman who had once mirrored strength to him. During his fifth treatment, a stranger approached him. "You're the guy who brings soup and stories." Alistair smiled. "No, I'm the guy learning not to disappear." On the sixth visit, Jacqueline didn't come. Instead, Serenity walked in. Stylish, fierce, her eyes softer than usual. She said nothing, just handed him a small frame. Inside was a sketch, a broken pillar growing flowers through the cracks. He stared. Trinity called it inheritance of grace. He whispered, "I don't deserve this." Serenity tilted her head. "You don't get to choose what others forgive. You just show up anyway." Then she turned and walked out. That night, Alistair fell asleep clutching the frame, not as a trophy, but as a lifeline. 15 candles flickered across the garden table, dancing shadows over two faces that were once mirror images and now barely reflected each other at all. Trinity clapped her hands and blew hers out with a playful whoop. Serenity paused, then followed, quieter, more composed, like she was still unsure if this day belonged to her. Their birthday. The first one since he came back. The first one without him. Balloons arched across the patio. Friends buzzed around with cameras and cupcakes. Music pulsed from discreet speakers. Everything looked perfect. But Jacqueline knew better. There was a missing piece that no party favors could fill. Not for Serenity, not yet. "Mom, who's the bouquet from?" Trinity asked, tugging the ribbon off a white and gold box sitting neatly beside the cake. Jacqueline's fingers hesitated on the knife. "It's from your father." Serenity's head snapped toward her. Trinity just blinked. Jacqueline continued, "He sent gifts for both of you. They arrived this morning." Trinity opened hers first. Inside the box, a custom-made digital piano engraved in cursive, "To the rhythm in my silence. Love, Dad." She gasped. "He remembered my lessons." Jacqueline smiled softly. "He asked what keys you liked best. I told him the ones that made you feel brave." Trinity's eyes glistened. She hugged the keyboard close, as if it were arms. "Can I write him a thank you?" Jacqueline nodded. "You should." Serenity stood beside her own unopened box. She stared at it like it was evidence, not a present. "Are you going to open it?" Trinity asked. "I don't know. Maybe it's something special too." Serenity turned to her sister, her voice quiet but sharp. "He wasn't there when I needed a dad. Now I'm supposed to clap because he sent a box?" Trinity recoiled. Hurt blinked in her eyes, but she didn't push. Jacqueline stepped forward gently. "Serenity." But Serenity was already walking away, leaving the box unopened under the fading glow of garden lights. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the balloons had sagged, slightly in the humid air, Serenity sat on the swing under the orange tree. Alone. She held her phone in her hand. Alistair had sent a message. "Happy birthday, my brave girl. You don't have to forgive me today. You don't even have to read this. But I want you to know, this box isn't an apology. It's a promise that I will keep showing up, in letters, in choices, in the man I am now trying to be. Love, Dad." Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then she powered it off. The next morning, Trinity found her on the porch. "He wrote me too," Trinity said, sitting beside her. Serenity didn't speak. Trinity continued, "He said he's learning to feel before he fixes, that he doesn't expect praise, just space." Serenity's eyes narrowed. Space is easy when you've already walked out the door. But he walked back in. Serenity looked away, bitter. "Because he got sick." Trinity shrugged. "Or maybe because he got human." They sat in silence. Then Trinity added, "I opened your gift." Serenity turned sharply. "You what?" Trinity held up a slim envelope. "Not to snoop. Just to make sure it wasn't performative." She handed it over. Inside, a small leather-bound journal. Handwritten notes, sketches, pages filled with pieces of Alistair. One page read, "Serenity once told me red was too loud, so I painted her world in dusk tones, soft enough for her truth to bloom." Serenity's breath caught. Another page. "If she never speaks to me again, I will still write to her, because love doesn't expire when it's ignored. It just waits, patiently, like a lighthouse." Serenity closed the journal gently. She didn't cry, but her hands were trembling. That afternoon, she walked into her room, sat on her bed, opened the box. Inside wasn't jewelry, or gadgets, or money. It was a painting, a canvas of two sisters standing on opposite shores of a river, their hands reaching across the water. Behind them, a third figure sat under a tree, watching, waiting, not trying to force his way across. Just there, underneath it, a note. "I know I'm not on your side yet, but I will be here. When you're ready to let the river part." She didn't smile. But she didn't close the box either. Jacqueline walked by the open door and paused. "Thank you," Serenity said without turning. "For what?" "For not forcing me to feel before I was ready." Jacqueline stepped in, kissed her daughter's forehead, and whispered, "Feel when you must, but never let pain be your identity." That night, Serenity placed the journal beside her pillow, and for the first time in years, she didn't dream of the day he left. She dreamed of a tree, and someone waiting beneath it. Power isn't a title. Alistair had learned that the hard way, through silence, absence, and the ache of his daughter's cautious stares. He once held empires in his palm. Now he walked into a modest downtown building with no press, no security detail, no flash of black cars. Just a clipboard, a ballpoint pen, and a name tag that read, "Volunteer, Alistair, Trinity's Foundation, Sound Start, serve children with learning differences through music therapy." He didn't suggest improvements. He didn't demand meetings. He simply showed up, twice a week. No headlines, no expectations. The receptionist had once whispered to another staffer, "Wait, that's Alistair Hawthorne?" The janitor replied without looking up, "That's Trinity's dad now." That was the point. He was no longer trying to prove a name. He was trying to live one. Inside the music room, the air was a blend of patience and promise. Children with autism, selective mutism, and social anxiety gathered in small circles. There were tambourines, keyboard pads, wooden shakers, laughter mixed with off-key hums and spontaneous rhythms. Alistair sat cross-legged among them. He didn't lead. He listened. A boy named Miguel, nonverbal for over a year, once sat beside him and tapped a xylophone twice. Alistair didn't speak. He tapped it twice back. Then Miguel smiled. That was enough. Trinity noticed him one afternoon through the observation window, her father kneeling beside a child who had dropped their instrument, not reacting, just waiting. She turned to one of the lead coordinators. "You know he used to buy silence with contracts?" The coordinator nodded. "Now he earns it by presence." He never asked Trinity to forgive him, but every week he arrived 5 minutes early, cleaned the tambourines, and left 10 minutes after the kids were gone, stacking chairs in quiet rows. One day, a small girl tugged his sleeve. "Mr. Alistair," she whispered, "how come you know how to be quiet with us?" He smiled gently. "Because someone very important to me taught me that love doesn't have to speak loudly to be real." The girl grinned and hugged him. Meanwhile, his name still opened doors in the business world, but now he used it differently. When Trinity's Foundation applied for a federal grant, the reviewer paused at the application. "Alistair Hawthorne is backing this?" His letter read, "Once I built towers that cast shadows over others. Now I want to build spaces where no one stands unseen." The application was approved, but Alistair didn't take the podium at the gala. Trinity did. She stood beside him and introduced him as a man in transformation. That was all. He wept quietly in the third row. Jacqueline heard about his volunteering through whispers at a brunch. "You know your ex is mopping floors at Sound Start?" She smiled into her tea. "No, I didn't." That evening, she looked up the foundation's social media. There were no photos of him, Just a video of a little girl playing a duet with a suited man. His face was off camera, but she recognized his hand. The same one that once slammed doors, now steady on piano keys, lifting a melody out of silence. One day, Serenity walked into Sound Start unannounced. She had a friend whose brother was on the waiting list. Alistair didn't see her at first. He was helping a child match notes on a chart. Then their eyes met. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away. That was progress. She lingered by the door, watching as he knelt beside another child with a tuning fork and a blanket. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't say a word. Later that evening, she told Jacqueline, "He's different." Jacqueline replied, "Or maybe he's finally becoming the man you both needed him to be." Alistair didn't need applause anymore. He needed rhythm, routine, redemption, not in grand gestures but in tuning keys and showing up and rewiring his purpose. The man who once conquered boardrooms now found value in fixing broken guitar strings for a 5-year-old. And in those small acts, he was rewriting his role, not just as a father, but as a man. The ballroom shimmered beneath soft chandeliers. Velvet drapes framed the gold end of every stage, and in the air hung a kind of reverence, like everyone knew they were about to witness something that would echo for years. A banner read, "Women and Resilience, Building What Tried to Break Us Keynote, Jacqueline Hawthorne." Rows of influential figures, investors, human rights advocates, executives filled the seats. But in the last row, dressed simply in navy and shadow, sat a man who had once vowed she'd never succeed without him. Alistair Hawthorne didn't belong in the light tonight. He was here to witness it. Jacqueline didn't stride to the podium. She floated. Her deep emerald gown wrapped her like armor, regal, fierce, soft only where she chose to be. There was no script in her hand, just a fire in her eyes. "My name is Jacqueline," she began, voice calm, rich, and undaunted. "I was once a wife. I became a mother, and somewhere in the storm of being abandoned, I became more." Silence fell over the room like a curtain drawn tight. Alistair didn't breathe. She didn't name him. She didn't have to. She wove her story in metaphors. A woman whose foundation cracked, whose walls fell, who found herself sleeping on a couch beside her daughters because the home she built now echoed with betrayal. "And yet," Jacqueline said, her voice rising, "pain was never my final chapter." The crowd leaned in. It was just the page before the rise. She spoke of building her first nonprofit while Serenity and Trinity napped, of negotiating contracts with CEOs who dismissed her until she brought 10 times the value they thought she could, of fundraising for single mothers, starting scholarship funds, launching tech skills programs for displaced women. Alistair's hands were clenched in his lap. Every sentence she spoke was a candle relit, one he had once tried to blow out. Now it burned brighter than ever. Jacqueline turned to the screen behind her. Photos filled it. Her at a dig site in Jordan with a team of women engineers. Her daughters opening their own STEM camp. Her on the cover of Forbes Woman, the headline. The empire she built, from divorce papers to global impact, the audience clapped. Alistair did not. He swallowed hard and smiled. He was not there for applause. He was there for awe. "Resilience," Jacqueline continued, "isn't the absence of pain. It's the decision that pain will never own your voice." She paused, then looked up, not into the lights, but beyond them. Her eyes locked for just a flicker of a second, with a figure in the last row. He hadn't expected her to see him, but she did. She saw. Then she continued, "And today, I don't just stand as someone who survived heartbreak. I stand as someone who turned it into her greatest catalyst." When the speech ended, the room rose in standing ovation. Jacqueline stepped back from the podium, let the roar wrap around her like thunder and truth. She bowed once, then disappeared behind the velvet curtain. Alistair stayed seated. He didn't try to go backstage, didn't send a text, didn't ask to be acknowledged. This wasn't about him. This was the coronation of a woman who had once knelt for love, crawled through fire, and emerged not as someone's ex, but as her own legacy. Backstage, Jacqueline removed her earrings slowly. Her assistant beamed. "You were electric." She smiled softly. "I was free." That night, she returned home to a house full of fresh flowers. Dozens of arrangements, all different. No note, except one card taped to the front door, handwritten. "Every stem is for a moment I missed. Every petal is for the power you grew in my silence." She stood there, hand on her chest, eyes filling, not from sorrow, but from how far she'd come. It started with a text from Serenity. "We're inviting you to dinner." Trinity agreed. "One night. Don't mess it up." There were no hearts, no emojis, just firm punctuation and a clear challenge. Alistair sat frozen, phone trembling slightly in his hand. 15 years ago, he'd walked out of a home glowing with candlelight and baby laughter. Now, they were inviting him into a space that wasn't about apologies. It was about effort. The dinner was set in Jacqueline's city penthouse, a place he'd only seen in magazines, once dubbed the Vault of Vision by architectural elites. He arrived exactly on time. Not early enough to appear desperate. Not late enough to seem disrespectful. Wearing a simple charcoal blazer, no tie, his once meticulous hair now touched by wisdom silver. At the door he hesitated, then knocked. It was Trinity who opened it, not with a smile, but with posture, straight, unshaken, observant. "You're here," she said flatly, stepping aside. "No hug?" He tried. "Dinner first," she replied. "Maybe hugs later. If you survive." That was her version of kindness. The table was intimate, not grand. 4 seats, no servers, no formalities, just home-cooked food laid out in elegant simplicity. Baked salmon, rosemary potatoes, roasted vegetables, all prepared by Serenity, who now carried a quiet grace in the kitchen Jacqueline had once ruled alone. Alistair sat, unsure if he should comment. Trinity noticed. Serenity cooked. "I just taste-tested. I didn't think I'd be welcomed like this," Alistair said carefully. Serenity replied, "You weren't. You were invited." The clinking of cutlery filled the early minutes. Tension dripped into the salad dressing. Then Serenity broke the silence. "You've been volunteering with our foundation." Alistair nodded, swallowing hard. "Trying to learn what I missed." Jacqueline didn't speak. She simply poured more wine into her glass, quietly watching. Trinity finally added, "You missed a lot." Alistair didn't defend himself, didn't offer reasons or excuses. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 hand-folded cards. "I didn't bring gifts. I brought letters. Each envelope bore their names, handwritten. I wrote one for each of you, not to explain, but to acknowledge." Trinity raised an eyebrow. "You think acknowledgement is a Band-Aid?" "No," Alistair answered. "But sometimes, knowing someone sees your wound helps it scar with dignity." The table fell into a silence far deeper than awkwardness. It was reflection. Jacqueline finally spoke. "The girls asked me to stay. Not because this is reconciliation." He nodded. "Understood. They wanted me here in case old patterns tried to sneak in through the back door." Alistair took the hit with a quiet grace. "I came through the front." Serenity opened her envelope. Inside was not just a letter, but a pressed camellia flower, her mother's favorite. She looked up slowly. "I used to carry this in my diary," she whispered. "How did you know?" Alistair smiled gently. "Your mother wore it in her hair every time she needed strength." I remembered. For the first time, Serenity blinked tears away and didn't hide them. Trinity didn't open hers yet. She pushed her plate forward, folded her arms, and asked the question no one else would. "Why now? Why show up after everything you destroyed?" Alistair looked at her directly. "Because I realized power was never a mansion, a stock portfolio, or a 27-digit bank account." He paused. "It's having a seat at the table, and earning it." She stared at him, long and hard. Then she leaned forward and said, "You're not owed a family, Alistair, but you might still build one, brick by brick." He nodded. "I want that. Then don't show up when it's convenient. Show up when it's messy." "I'm ready for messy," he said. "Good," she replied, "because next week's board meeting at the foundation is open to the public." "Let's see if you'll still come." Jacqueline rose from the table. She walked to the window, the skyline of the empire she built lighting her reflection. When she turned around, she addressed them all, mother, daughters, man. "I'm not here to referee. I'm here to witness," she said. "What you 3 become from here isn't about forgiveness. It's about forward." Then she walked over to the closet and pulled something out. It was an old photo, the last one taken before Alistair left. The twins in their toddler pajamas. Jacqueline in her robe. Alistair, blurry in the background, phone to his ear. She placed it in the center of the table. "This was our last dinner as a family." Then she added a fresh new frame beside it. Tonight's photo. Serenity had snapped it earlier without anyone noticing. Everyone seated at the table. No blurs. No phones. Just presence. "Let this be the next," Jacqueline said, "if you all mean it." And then she walked out of the room. Not as a wife, not as a judge, but as a woman who had passed the torch. Trinity reached for her envelope. This time, she opened it. Inside was a note that read, "You were always the one I feared I hurt the most, but your fire, it's what saved me." Tears slipped down her cheeks. For once, she didn't wipe them away. They all sat there. 3 people who had been broken in different ways by one man's choices, now carving out something that could be called possibility, not healing, not yet, but maybe a beginning. It was raining that morning. Not a soft drizzle, but a thunder-laced downpour that made the windows shiver in their frames. Jacqueline stood in her quiet kitchen, barefoot, the aroma of cinnamon and ginger lingering in the air from the bread she'd baked hours before sunrise. On the marble island sat a single white candle, unlit, not decorative, not scented, just sacred. It had been exactly 15 years since he left. The same date, same hour. She remembered the moment like it was woven into her bones. Alistair's back, turned, suitcase in hand, thunder echoing as he closed the door behind him. Back then, it felt like the world cracked in half. Now, she only lit the candle once a year, not to mourn, not to remember him, but to honor the woman she became after the wreckage. She struck a match. Its hiss filled the silence. The candle came alive, steady, bright, undemanding, just like her. Outside, the rain pounded, but Jacqueline stood unmoved, wrapped in a silk robe the color of deep wine, her hair tied back in a low, elegant knot. She looked not like a woman recovering from loss, but one who had risen from it, tall and sovereign. The candle's light danced on her cheekbones. She reached out, palm hovering near the flame. No more tears, no more questions, no more why me. The knock on the door was soft, predictable. She didn't flinch, didn't rush. She took her time walking to the door, each step intentional. When she opened it, Alistair stood on the other side. No umbrella, soaked, yet not shivering. He looked like a man willing to be drenched for the truth. "I thought I'd find you here," he said gently. She nodded, stepping aside just enough. He didn't enter, not fully, just lingered near the doorframe, watching the candle in the distance flicker through the living room. "You still light it," he said. "Not for you," she answered plainly. "I didn't expect you to." There was no anger left between them, just clarity, a kind of stillness that no longer needed thunder to explain the storm that came before. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said. "Good, because I have nothing left to give you." That wasn't cruel. It was kind. "True." He nodded slowly. "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For raising them to be better than us." Jacqueline didn't respond immediately. "Then, you helped with that." "Too late. But still, you helped." They stood in silence again. Not lovers, not strangers. Something in between, like pages of a story that had been torn, then folded back in. "You're glowing," he whispered. She smiled, not the way she used to when she still hoped he'd come back, but the way women smile when they've realized they no longer need closure from the ones who hurt them. "I've been glowing for a while," she said. "You just weren't close enough to see it." He laughed, soft, broken, but real. "You always knew how to shut a man up without raising your voice." She looked at him fully now. "You were never the thunder, Alistair." He raised an eyebrow. "I was," she continued. "You were the lightning, fast, flashy. But the thunder, the steady pulse after the storm, that was always me." He didn't argue, didn't deflect. Instead, he turned toward the rain-soaked city and said, "They'll be okay. They already are." "And you?" She tilted her head. For a long time, he remained at the door, soaking, silent. Then he looked at her one last time. "I know I'm not invited in." She nodded. "But thank you," he said, "for lighting that candle. Even if it wasn't for me." Jacqueline stepped back toward the kitchen, her silhouette framed by the gentle flame. "Take care of yourself, Alistair." "I will." And with that, he turned and walked into the rain. The door closed. Soft click. No dramatic slam, just finality. Back in the living room, the candle burned brighter than before. Serenity and Trinity were due to arrive in an hour for their annual family brunch. A celebration, a tradition. But Jacqueline wasn't waiting for them. She was celebrating now. Because this day wasn't about a man who left. It was about a woman who never did. She sat by the window, coffee in hand, and pulled out her journal. Each year, she wrote one sentence on this day. Only one. She opened the leather-bound pages, flipped past 14 past entries. Year 1, I survived the silence. Year 2, I held my daughters through the dark. Year 3, I built an empire from the ashes. Year 4, I learned to trust my own voice. Year 5, I stopped checking the door. Year 6, I laughed again. Year 7, I kissed someone who wasn't him. Year 8, I no longer flinch at rain. Year 9, I saw my reflection and smiled. Year 10, I forgave myself. Year 11, I forgave him. Year 12, I danced with no music. Year 13, I led the gala alone and shined. Year 14, I buried the bitterness. She turned the page, picked up her pen, wrote, Year 15, I smiled, not because he came back, but because I moved on. The candle flame wavered for a second as a gust brushed through the slightly open window, but it didn't go out. Jacqueline stood again. She looked at the empire outside her window, one she built without shortcuts, without saviors. Then she glanced back at the candle and blew it out, not to extinguish something, but to mark the end of a chapter. The next would begin not in shadows, but in full, blazing light. If you've ever glowed quietly while the world wasn't watching, comment, I am the fire. And don't forget to subscribe, beautiful family, because healing is the real power.